Yeah. Question from somebody watching, Ian Weir, who's got a nice smile on his face there. Is there more that the wider rowing community could do to support the boat race, given how significant and important it is to the sport? And in return, does the boat race need to engage more with the domestic scene? Who wants to take that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I'd sort of take the... I'll take that if you're right, Seb. So jump in there. Yeah, I think, so there's two parts to that question, and I'll start with the second part. Actually, as part of our review of where we are, actually, what we're looking at is actually what can we do? How can we engage more with the community? How can we engage more with the broader rowing community? And it's slightly difficult this year, but it's definitely something we're looking to explore. If anyone's got any ideas, send them in. But it's something we feel really strongly about. We recognise that we have a very special place, and actually, what can we do more to share it with more people? How can we engage more young people in it, maybe more families? How can we take what we really feel are some really special elements about the boat race? You know, it's not just the winning or losing, it's being part of something, it's the training, it's the dedication that it takes, it's all those things, those values that come out of rowing, and how can we share those a bit more broadly? So that's definitely, you know, Ian, yes, we're definitely looking at how we can do that. We haven't got an answer right now, but we're working on it. In terms of the wider, you know, rowing community, we are so fortunate already to have incredible help from and support from many of the clubs on the Tideway, and we're already getting some great help from Isle of Ely up at Ely, and King's School Ely are helping us, and we really appreciate that hugely. We couldn't put on our event in London or in Ely without that kind of support. This year, you know, normally we'd say come and watch, support us, switch on your TVs. But this year on April the 4th, we're going to ask you to do that, to put on your TV and watch it. And actually supporting the event means watching it. And, you know, I'll put out a plea. It would be great to see the viewing figures for the women's race be up more. So, you know, we'd love to see, you know, more people switching on earlier. And that would be a really big thing. And that's obviously not just for the rowing community. That's just sport in general, to see that, these great, you know, great races. What else do you think, Seb? Have I said enough?
Yeah, you know, look, I think we're also going to try, you know, there's something that's coming out over Christmas. So we've been working with Row 360, you know, this you know, I think there's a lot of really interesting sort of stories within the race. And, you know, obviously for the rowing community, we know that the race, you know, it is one of the marquee events. And so we're trying to get more of the stories out there too. So there will be a free to download or free to read, quite substantial e-magazine. It will come out over the Christmas period. Done by Row 360, and you know they're you know one of the, I think, sort of quality rowing magazine producers out there, and so that will come out very shortly. So hopefully everybody, you know, anybody who's interested in the race, read that, spend your time. It's absolutely free as well. So you know we're trying to think differently about stuff that we can do, and I think, you know, obviously we've had to think very differently this year about where we take the race as well. So if people have got ideas, please feel free to send them in. There's some emails on the website that you can, you know, any of those will be collected.
You touched on the women's race there, Siobhan. One of the things around the women's race was the hope that there would be a race with quite a tight, relatively tight contest. It's been won by quite a margin by one side or the other. It tends to be, and the feeling was that would take time to mature. Where is the women's race on that in terms of, you know, closeness to racing? And
yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult to tell. I can't give you the answer, and you know, about what's going to happen in 2021. What we do know is that, you know, both teams have got great coaches. They've got great structures in place. They're attracting great athletes from within the college system, and, you know, those from outside. It is going to take time to bring those close races. I mean, for many years, many of the men's races have had big margins. What's controlled that and how that's worked over time. So it is going to take a bit of time to settle out. But, you know, there are some really strong athletes in both programs. And it seems a bit harsh sometimes when the margin seems so far at points. But actually, what the students are doing is great, and I think what they go on to do as well is also great. So I think, you know, just give us a bit of time, And I think you will see some close racing.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean,
Martin,
you know, the women's race was, you know, there's a really big movement, obviously, in women's sport at the moment, and we've seen, you know, incredible viewing figures for the, you know, the Women's World Cup and things like that. But, you know, I think people forget that actually the boat race was quite a long way. You know, so we're only talking about 5 years ago, but actually it was a long way ahead of its time. And the viewing figures for the women's race have been quite incredible. You know, there's been more people watching the women's race than watch the women's final of Wimbledon in some years. You know, and and this is just an amateur event too. You know, the platform that the boat race was able to establish for women's sport was pretty impressive. And hopefully that will, you know, hopefully we can build on it and do more with it. But you know, I think it should be remembered it was relatively ahead of its time at the time, even though that was, you know, it's sad to say it was only 5 years ago.
Yeah. I know this is close to your heart, Siobhan, because you've got kids at American universities, but I wonder how much or what your view is on the scholarship system at American universities, which in recent years seems to have really taken off and taken a lot of potential boat race athletes away from, say, going to Oxbridge and going to places like, you know, Cal or Washington or Princeton or Harvard. What's your take on that?
Well, for me, I just think it's great for young people to have opportunity and choices. And actually the opportunity to go and study somewhere. I mean, when we're all now in this country as well, it's expensive to go to university. It's a choice that some families are not able to support their children to make. And actually, so I think for young people, I think it's great that they have that opportunity. And if their sport can take them, you know, off somewhere to have an exciting opportunity and to really benefit from 4 years at a program where they have a great time, great experiences, great education, and they come out of it with less debt, that can only be a good thing. I'm sure Seb and I would both like to say, you know, work hard at school, get great grades, you know, come to Cambridge. Or maybe go to Oxford, but you know, become part of it. I came to Cambridge as a graduate, so you know, it may be that it's just at that point of your life you make that application, and for whatever reason you might not choose to do an Oxford application, or you might not have got the grades, or it might not have worked out. You made a different choice. It doesn't matter. There's other entry points. So I think. Is that sort of like a brain drain? No, I think it's giving another opportunity. And actually, when you think of the children who are out there, actually, how many of those might be part of, you know, a British, you know, national team program here? They're now very well supported by the British team in their pursuits and kept up with. So I think there's now a bit more of a training group, and so I think support for different opportunities for people, is really important.
Yeah,
we are really fortunate. I think both of the universities, they are incredibly fortunate. There aren't necessarily sports scholarships available, but in terms of the opportunities for funding, you know, Oxford and Cambridge are head and shoulders in reality above all of the other UK universities in terms of the endowments and the funding pools that they have. You know, it's an extremely fortunate position that students applying to the university have, and so. You know, don't necessarily look. I know that you know, abroad there is a lot of, you know, there are scholarships available for sport, but Oxford and Cambridge, you know, if you're smart enough to get in, there's probably a channel for you to get academic funding as well. And you know, we are extremely fortunate, I think, at the universities for that. So
yeah, it's a very good point.
I'm just wondering, in terms of changes of British rowing, it hasn't always been possible for guys in the boat race to actually combine, you know, being part of the Oxford or Cambridge squads and rowing for the British squad. I remember, you know, back somebody in your time, Seb, Tom James had real significant problems when he decided to row for Cambridge in 2007. And Jürgen Grobler didn't like that. Well, Jürgen's gone now, and the men's sweep coach is a former boat race coach, Steve Trapmore. I wonder if you see that, you know, things might be easier for boat race rowers to combine a career with the boat race and sink in with the national squad.
I mean, look, I'd love to see it. I mean, obviously, you know, I think both Siobhan and ourselves, you know, we love to see people participate in the boat race, but also we're extremely keen to see the national team do well as well. I think the two are probably compatible. I understand why there's been some issues in the past. Fortunately for Oxford, we're pretty much, obviously Reading's a little bit closer, but we're as close to Caversham as you could be if you want a university to train at and do both. And the training program within the national team is really hard. And I think a lot of students from a mental health side and young people have found that combining the two, actually really helps, having academia to take your mind away from the amount of training that you're doing and the mental hardship that comes with that. Has often been a good thing. So yeah, it would be great to see it. Whether it will be fully compatible, I don't know. I mean, but when you look at it, Martin, there's been so many, even in recent times, so many of the national team have been through the boat race programs too, and obviously they've been through other programs, like the Brook programs and Leander and a number of other universities, but there's been high number of boat race gold medalists and other medalists in the national team. So I think it is compatible, and I hope it will be for a long time.
Seb, you were mentioning that and I think you've said this as well, Siobhan, that the kind of demographic of Oxford and Cambridge are changing. There's a wider selection in terms of undergraduates, which could mean that because rowing takes a lot of people that row come from private education. So that means less of them will get in. Does that mean the gene pool for Oxford and Cambridge undergraduate rowers is going to shrink?
I think that's probably the reality of it. I think there's a couple of things that I think everybody's acknowledged needs to change, and I think within the wider rowing community there's a lot of talk and there's some really good effort, but I think people, it's nice to see rowing change, but we've probably not gone far enough within the rowing community to make the rowing a broad enough sport as a whole. But the reality is that at both universities, the number of assisted school applications is going up and up and up. So which is great to see. But rowing, especially remember we're sweep rowing, and we do have some scullers that come in and switch. But sweep rowing at junior level is still very, very heavily dominated by some of the larger private schools. So I think we still we still do have a lot of undergraduates and a lot of people who've learned to row prior to coming to Oxford or Cambridge. But I think the reality is that will change over time, so we'll have to adapt to that too. But the universities have changed quite significantly too over the past 30 years. The graduate population has grown quite significantly. Sort of 40 or 50 years ago, there were, I think, 12,000 students, of which 3,000 were undergrads. We're now graduates, and now both of the universities are sort of 24 to 26,000. So, and it's all the growth has been in the graduate population. So they're changing quite materially. But I think it's something that's definitely on our radar to make sure that we've got a good development program, so as young people can come through both of the universities, but also it will be one of the challenges, I think, for the rowing programs too.
Yeah,
it's a good challenge for us to have. We both have great coaching teams who develop people really well, and so actually, if young people are coming in and they've done other sports and they've learnt to row at Oxford or Cambridge, then actually join one of our programs is a great opportunity for them.
Yeah,
I think 75% of our men's team this year is undergraduate. So it's still they're still young teams. So it's not just all people coming in, after being in the US or whatever.
So let's take a look at what's on your horizon in terms of, you mentioned this e-magazine, which I've had a sneak preview at. It looks a really interesting and great read. What's on your horizon? What are the landmarks between now and the boat race that you guys are looking at?
So the
not looking now, getting everyone back to term for a start, isn't it?
Yeah, I think
after today.
Is Tier 4 going to make a difference to you? I mean, because I know the guys weren't rowing as a group in lockdown in November.
No, and I think both Oxford and Cambridge are going to go into Tier 4. So,
what does that mean for you?
It's for British, we're all under British rowing guidelines, so that's back to single household rowing for everybody.
And does that mean that if it's Tier 4 in April, the boat race can't happen?
I think that's something that we're going to be looking at over the next the next few weeks. We're in I think we're in a better position than we were at the beginning of September, because obviously, while for everybody, training this year has been quite disrupted, obviously through COVID. At least we've got some in, which is great. And so the coaches have, people's physiology is obviously developing, and everybody's been able to train on land through the lockdowns. But also too, the coaches have had some time on the water and already have a feeling, I suspect, of maybe how 6 of the blue boat will be. There's probably a few places up for grabs still, and that there'll need to be some selection done, but we're in a much better pace than we were 3 months ago. I think the big challenge now, though, is training the crews rather than necessarily running the race. I think we've got a good location to be able to run a safe race, but we've got to make sure that the crews have had the opportunity to have some fair selection and prepare, and that's going to be, and I think that's probably the big challenge for everybody within sport at the moment, away from elite teams, is just getting training in, I think, as a group.
Is the boat race not classed in the same, or the athletes not in the same as like Premiership footballers, or
sadly not, no.
Even Strictly Come Dancing, I mean, they went and lived in a bubble, and the show carried on.
The thing is, Martin, these, I mean, look, they're not just rowers. They're still doing, they have incredible academic schedules too that they sort of have to fit in as well. So it's a bit of a balancing act. I think both. We are really fortunate at the universities that we have incredible, I think, support and experience from the academic staff. That obviously probably at the forefront of the research that's going on around COVID, but it's still a huge challenge. And I think it's the thing that a lot of businesses are struggling with at the moment. It's not just the challenge of operating within the restrictions that COVID poses. It's the ever-changing restrictions that are extremely challenging, and they change very, very quickly. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we have at the moment. But I think when you talked about landmarks, I think the first landmark for us will be getting them back to training. I think is going to be the real landmark. But we're also concurrently looking at 2022 and making sure that we've got contingencies in place. We hope that COVID will be in a better place. Obviously, by that, I think everybody hopes that clearly.
Yeah.
That will, that the vaccine rollout will help the world, and for us help the UK. But also too, we've still got Hammersmith Bridge on the horizon there, which is, I did see that there's going to be, some selective opening to allow river traffic through. But to be honest, that's not going to particularly help us, because if they were to shut it the day before, and it takes a long time for them to assess all the instruments that might have gone off to cause a closing, that's no good really for running a race. So I think we still have to think of, hopefully Hammersmith Bridge will be resolved for the whole of the rowing community, particularly the clubs who train in London. It's causing huge disruption for everybody there, but we will be looking to come back to London, but also contingency plan and see whether we can have another option, as opposed to one that necessarily has to go into Hammersmith Bridge too. So we're sort of doing those things concurrently, but it's certainly difficult times and that was one of the reasons for moving to Ely. We felt we could be more nimble there than we can be in London. So
yeah. So I'm thinking, are you broadly hopeful about the 2021 race, given the situation with this tier 4?
I think so.
I think we are. I mean, we've got a plan, we've got a location, haven't we? I think it's a case of getting the students back, and I have to say, I think on both Oxford and Cambridge, they did a really good job of managing themselves through the term within those limitations and within those changes. And I think for a lot of them, actually, they would say that having the rowing team and the sport has really helped them. It's got them out of their room. So it's been a really positive thing. But it has been, it's been a very thoughtful term for them to make sure their exterior, everything else they've been doing around, has meant that they haven't been in situations where they've picked up a virus. So they've done that very well. And again, that's our priority, is to look after the team first and foremost. And we will be looking to see, what that means going forward, what that means for in both Oxford and Cambridge, being part of when the universities go back. Sport can happen if the universities go back, but in what way, and if there is still a lockdown, whether that's training at home or, and so there's those phases. So yeah, we are planning for it. We just need to be flexible and responsive to what's going on. And I think the most important thing is that we do have a race in 2021.
Yeah, exactly. And just so I'm clear, because I'm thinking with schools, schools are open and rowing teams are able to work and function.
We don't have an education carve out, Martin. So within school, you're allowed to, because it's education and it's part of the curriculum. But this is all in their free time. So yeah, we're in the same boat as clubs. And often, sometimes a little bit stricter, to be quite honest. So, I mean, I think also too, look, it's clearly, it's not good for everybody that the infection rates are going up at the moment. So I think in terms of timing for, particularly for our race, this is a better time for there to be a lockdown than later on. We need a period really in March to have a good run into the race. That's what really the students and the clubs need, and we can do all the planning for the race behind in the background. That's absolutely fine, but we've just got to get the students and the coaches an opportunity to train just in the run up to the race, I think. And so I think hopefully for everybody, if the vaccine rollout continues, and that helps the situation, but also to these increase in tiers and hopefully a control of infection rates at the moment. If that can get under control and the world's in a better place by March, then I think we've got a great opportunity of running a race. And that was that's always been our priority. But I think and if that's not the way it works out, we're gonna we've adapted so far, we're gonna have to adapt again, because we want to get a race in for the students.
It's interesting. Could the boat race? Is there a scenario where the boat race could be moved?
It could be. There's always been there's always been a reticence to do that because of the exam periods. But the exam, all of this sort of the academic timetables up in the air as well. There's a lot of disruption there too. So it's certainly not off the cards, I don't think. But the first one at the moment.
I mean, look, a couple of years ago, people have said you wouldn't. A couple of years ago, people would have said you wouldn't have moved it from London. So actually, we've moved it it's been moved from London, and so actually moving it by a month or a couple of months or whatever, it is what it is, isn't it? Really, it's possible to do.
Yeah. And I guess interesting selection issues are quite, because normally, there might be last minute seat races and rowing in 8s and 4s. And clearly, if they're going back into household groups, singles are on the erg, the selection issues facing, coaches are going to kind of magnify, really.
It is. But I think, look, it's like.
Yeah, they are. And the coaches.
Oh, we're losing Siobhan now. I think. I mean, but it's like all the clubs out there, Martin. We have access to things like telemetry. You get a lot more information. The whole. You can be collecting data the whole time. It's I think there's a lot of information that can be used now. Whether it will be the optimal, I think always coaches would always like to do things absolutely as methodically as they could do, but I think everybody's having to adapt in this environment. Training isn't the same. We've not been able to do you can't do physiology testing in the same way that you could have done a year ago, because obviously distancing, it's not hygienic, or you need to be really careful about taking bloods from things like that. So we've had to adapt anyhow, and I think the coaches are in a really good they will adapt. They're very experienced, and I think the students will understand that too. It's I think they're really, really behind this, because I think they realise that everybody is doing absolutely everything they can do to get them a race in, and they will have to adapt a little bit too.
Just going to ask you, just to kind of draw a close to what we've been fascinating listening to you guys tonight. What would be your wish for 2021 if you were making it on New Year's Eve? I'm going to ask you first, Siobhan, because Seb jumped in on his profile to start off with. So I'm going to.
So what my wish
for 2021?
Oh my goodness, for health, for everybody, for the vaccine to get out. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's what I'd be hoping for, is that we're all vaccinated and this gets all cleared up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a boat race one. Did you want a boat race one as well?
Well, you can throw that one in there. Yeah, go on.
And a boat race one, I'd love to see us having a race in Ely on the 4th of April in decent enough weather that we get to see the very best performances of everyone racing, that we get some tight, exciting racing for everyone to watch. And for us then to, go on from that, to feel really proud of what they've done this year, because they will have got there in really difficult circumstances.
Yeah. How about you, Seb?
Yeah, it's clearly the same. I think everybody is hoping for this situation, the pandemic, to sort its way out and to work our way out of that. But otherwise, 2 Oxford victories by a foot, I guess, is on April 4th.
Yeah, right.
You got that one over you, Siobhan.
Yeah, he did. I'm always very generous like that, but when it comes to the day, we get on well before the day, and that for that, couple of hours, that's it. I won't speak to him.
couldn't happen to a nicer team on their own water, could it? So that's
well, I tell you what, those trophies are in Cambridge at the minute, and they'll be hard, very difficult to get out. I tell you.
Pried away from your cold hands. Yeah. Exactly. Siobhan Cassidy and Seb Pearce are going to end the live part of this broadcast there. Thank you ever so much for your time this evening. I know, it's not always easy to find the time to talk. Well, I hope your Crossy's Corner experience hasn't been too bad.
It's been lovely. Thank you very much. It's been esteemed company. It's a real privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. See you guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.